All right, gang, let's catch up on Gazala from Revolution Games. I haven't touched it in a while. It's been sitting here waiting for me to come over and play it. It's a small game, shouldn't take that long to play, but I'm learning that the decision process in this game is actually pretty deep. It's pretty intricate. So, let's see, I'm gonna kill that light. All right, there we go. It's better. So, okay, victory conditions. All right, the Germans get them by knocking off British steps, which you don't tally to the end of the game. And right now, there's quite a few. All right. And of course, it's whoever has the most victory points wins. The Allies counter that by knocking off German steps, which, because of my ineptitude at playing this little thing, I put the Germans and the Italians in some bad spots, and they've lost quite a bit. All right. Another way the Germans get victory locations is by having 4 units in supply in any hex along that north edge. All right. They get 1 per turn, 1 victory point. Or occupying that fort hex right there, they get 1 point a turn. And the 90th LE was in there for 2 turns. As you can see, they're not there anymore because they're freaking destroyed. Damn Brits rolled an 8 on a 2-to-1 attack and forced them to retreat. And the only hex they had at the time to retreat to was an escarpment not through the road. And you can't do that, so it eliminated them. 2 units, all right? Only 90th LE left is sitting right there. All right. So on the 20, I'm sorry, I keep saying turn 29 because I'm playing EFS. On the 29th May turn, the Germans get breaches, 2 of them. And after they place those breaches, when determining their command points, I'm sorry, that was on the 28th. When determining their command points, their actions, they lose 1. Okay, one of these breaches has to be able to trace supply to the east to 8 units, 8 German units. Okay, zones of control do block supply. So the Germans only had 3 activations on the last turn. They only ended up getting 2 because the British armor moved down. And if you went like that top breach there, if he went up 1 and started to go over to the right, he can't go through those minefield lines. So he would have come back down to the road, and right there was that German or British armored unit. So neither one of those were able to trace supply out to 8 units. Okay. All right. Well, then they got a breach on the next turn over here. Only problem is, come June 1st, 2 of these breaches over here on this line have to be able to trace. Now, 2 of them supply out to 8 units. What's the reason for that? Is because on the initial attack in Gazala, when the Germans Italians swept around below, was it Bir Hakeim here? That supply line, the Rommel knew that was never going to last. They had to breach this minefield so they could use these roads to provide supply instead of going straight across the desert. So that's what that rule is trying to implement. So on June 1st, 2 of these breaches, and hopefully I'll get some more up here, have to provide supply to each of them to 8 units out here to the east. And I don't think that means 16 units. I think they have to be able to hit 8 units as if they were providing supply to them. All right, so we've had Bir Hakeim out of supply. Those Italian units hung on, but the Germans only got 2 activations, and they didn't get enough to go in there and hit these guys. But on this turn here now, these guys will become isolated, which means if you're out of supply, you attack with a -2 die roll modifier, but you defend normally. If you're isolated, you cannot attack and you defend with a -2. And then the fort gives you a +2. Yeah, the fort gives you a -2 to your defense, but it would end up being scratch if the Germans attack them because they're going to be isolated. So hopefully the Germans will get the right activations and they'll be able to go in here on the next turn and take care of that. Let's see. You can trace supply through a friendly unit. It just like most games, it negates zone of control. All right, so right now it's not looking great for the Germans because they've lost about the same number of units, if not maybe 1 more than the Allies have. All right, but the game's got a lot of these tactical markers, like an airstrike or a sandstorm, or maybe you get an armored replacement tactical unit, or you get a +1 to combat or a -1 to combat, and you draw them with your unit activation chits, and you might draw 2 or 3 of these tactical chits before you draw an activation chit, and then you can use them. And then there's some that you got to use immediately, like you got to use the airstrike immediately. The Allies have one that's called attacker withdrawal, where either you withdraw an entire formation off the board, which can be a good thing because you can pull their chit out of the cup. Like, for instance, let's say all the units of a formation were eliminated, but their chit is they're still supposed to put their chit in according to this chart. Well, you might be drawing that chit and there's no units to activate. So, and then they also have units that don't have an activation chit, and the only time you can use them is with like the extra move chit, where you can pick a unit from another formation to activate with the next activation chit that's drawn. So like you might draw an extra move chit, you might decide the 29th Indian unit right there, who doesn't have an activation chit. You're going to use him, and then the next chit you draw is the 2nd Armored. So when the 2nd Armored moves, he moves as if he was part of the 2nd Armored. And that's how that works. And the Allies have a few formations that don't have chits, so they just kind of sit around and pretty much do nothing unless you can find a reason to use, or unless you draw the extra move chit for them to move. So, I mean, the Germans could take advantage of that. So I think what needs to happen now is the 15th Panzer needs to get rid of that isolated unit sitting right there. The Italians need to get rid of Bir Hakeim. And then I think the Germans need to drive straight north to the coast. And then I think over here, 21st Panzer needs to drive up, take that hex back and secure it, and start getting those victory points. Because there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 turns left. All right. So if you want a game that is a small footprint, easy to look at counters, nothing fancy about them, but extremely different combat rules. Because this isn't one of those move everybody in and do your combat. You do combat on the fly. However, in order to get multiple units in there, if you want to move to a combat, you need to move all the units that you want to be in the combat to the objective before the combat. Now, the problem is after you move units, before you decide to how you're going to do your combat, you need to determine which unit you're going to use as the active unit. And then everything adjacent to the defender, the enemy, can attack. The problem is after you move a unit, if it's not the active unit, the one that's going to initiate the attack, and you move him down there so he can be part of the battle, you flip him over to his reduced side. So let's say that these British units were sitting here on the road, okay, like this, and you want to attack that Italian unit right there. So you got to decide, well, who is going to be the active unit? Well, they're all the same, so it doesn't matter. You just use one of them. So, but you want to get all 3 of them in the attack. So you would move him down, you would flip him over, all right, and then he's not going to because he'd be in that zone of control. But then you want this unit to be the active unit, so he would move and stay on his active side or his unused side. You conduct the combat, and then if he has points left over after you conduct the combat, he can continue to operate. But once he's done, he gets flipped over like such, okay? And that's how it works. So you got to think ahead and plan who you want to be in the combats, and then decide who the active unit's going to be. Your infantry units, this is interesting. The ones that have the white, if they have a white hard target number, or hard target value number, which is the first number, they cannot attack armored units. If they are attacked by armored units, they use that number in defense. Really, really strange. It's not a ton of little off-the-wall rules. It's like a handful. But it's enough to slow the pace of your game down and make you think a little more before you execute anything. The minefield breaches is one. The use of the tactical chits is another one. And then the movement and combat combined is really, really interesting. So while a lot of people would just say, oh, no, this is stupid. That's a very good system, actually. It'd be nice to see something else done in this system. I don't know if there is any out there or not, but it would be kind of interesting. I know that they have, most of the Revolution games have the tactical chit stuff in them and the activations, and that's fine, okay? I kind of like the random activations where it's not, okay, it's the Axis turn, they draw a chit. Then it's the Allies' turn, they draw a chit. I would like to throw them all in one cup and see what happens. I think that would be really, really interesting. So, all right, so that's Gazala. That's after I've played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 turns. All right, getting ready to start the 6th turn in this game. And we'll play a few more and then we'll update you. Maybe we might play this one to the end and then we'll update you on how it comes out. All right, good enough game. If you got it, get it out, take a look at it. Rules aren't hard to read through. A couple sections, you might want to read them once or twice to make sure you understand them, especially movement and combat. All right, let's get this posted. We'll talk to you all soon.